Hello, people. Dr. Wang is here. Today we're going to the new chapter, chapter number 9, stock valuation. And we're still using our previously learned skill to calculate time value of money. And in particular, we're getting the stock price today based on the cash flows generated in the future. So it's about solving for present value or net present value. Okay, so this picture gives you an idea of what a stock would be look like. Right, so you see that's a certificate that was issued in 1903, and this is 10 shares of a company stock, and the book value of the stock is $100. Right, so that's the information you have here. You do not have a maturity date for the stock. You only have an issuance date because the stock could last forever as long as the company exists forever. This is quite different from a bond because in any kind of bond, there's always a maturity date. Okay, so in stock valuation, just like any financial securities, we're getting the present value of all future cash flows. If the future cash flows are irregular, then we are going to use the method of net present value. Okay, so what are the cash flows generated by stock? If you buy a stock, you are expecting to get paid by dividends. Okay, so we're going to use the first model, discounted dividend model, to get the present value of all future dividends. So that will be the stock price, so the fair value of the stock in the market. Another model is called a corporate valuation model. For some stocks, like Facebook, they don't pay dividend at all, or Microsoft, they never paid the dividend until 2003. Okay, so for these companies, they keep their net income in retained earnings instead of paying them out. So we should really look at the free cash flows inside the company instead of the dividend paying out. So that's a different system to get the stock price. So it's called a present value of expected future free cash flows from operations. And I prefer to leave this model in chapter 12 when we are working on the cash flow estimations. So for the time being, in chapter 9, we only focus on model 1. All right, so the discounted dividend model, basically you can get the present value of all the dividends for the time you hold the stock. And then you'll add the present value of the stock price in the future when you sell the stock in the future. Okay, or you can just get the present value of all future dividends. Okay, so if you look at this scenario, you will see that if you hold the stock for only one period, you buy at time 0 and you sell at time 1, you will get a dividend 1 and you will get a price 1. They both happen a year from now, so discount with the return rate and raised to the power of 1. And if you buy the stock a year later and you sell it 2 years later, then your cash flow would be dividend 2 and price 2. And again, the fair price for the stock at time 1 would be the discount value of dividend 2 and price 2. All right, so if you combine these two equations, then you will see if you buy the stock for 2 years, you will receive dividend 1, dividend 2, and price 2 as cash flows. So you need to discount the cash flows according to their time period. All right, and you can extend the equation on and on. So you can have you can have a dividend 1, 2, 3. And a dividend 1 million if you hold the stock for infinity. And well, of course, you're going to have a price infinity, but if you apply the discount, which raised to the power infinity, basically anything would be discounted to a value of 0. So what you see here is the summation. This is the Greek letter sigma, stands for summation. The summation of an infinite amount of dividends in the future, and of course, each of the dividend will be discounted to present value. Okay, so you get the sum of all discounted dividends. That will be the price 0 today. All right, so thanks to the mathematicians, we can just use one sharp single formula to get the value of it. What you see here, the first one is actually the easiest one. Let me just zoom out a little bit. So you see dividend 1, dividend 2, dividend 3 equal to each other. That means for each period, the dividend is the same amount. And this is more like a preferred stock because for preferred stock, the dividend payment is fixed. And then you assume perpetuity. We have learned perpetuity in chapter 5. Basically, that means forever. So you're going to get a dividend 1, 2, 3, all the way to dividend 100, dividend million, and dividend infinity. Okay, and then you're going to discount all of them. If you shrink it down to one math formula, that's a very easy way to operate. You just use the first year's dividend divided by the required return. So if your dividend it keeps at $10, your required return is 5%. So it's going to be 10 divided by 5%. That's going to be 200. Okay, so P0 is going to be 200 if dividend 1 is 10, R is 5%. Okay, and here is an example. So if a preferred stock pays a dividend of $10 per year and the required return was 10.3%, so what's the value of the preferred stock? So your job is very simple. Just use $10 divided by 10.3%. So you're gonna get some value like 97.09. In your Excel project number 3, you really have to do it. And that Excel project, the video I showed you how to generate infinite amount of cash flows like what you have right here. Okay, so basically in the Excel project, I generate like 500 or 800 dividends. That is a good representation for perpetuity for infinite amount of dividends. And then I discount each of the dividends with the required return, and then I add all this infinite amount of dividends together to get price 0. Okay, so the price 0 I got from the summation of so many numbers is just the same as the price I get by using the first dividend divided by the required return. Okay, so you make sure go over Excel project 3 to verify this answer. Okay. All right, the next model is called constant growth. This time it does not stay constant. Instead, it will keep growing on and on, but the growth rate is actually constant at G. All right, so what you'll see here is dividend 1 equals to dividend 0 times 1 plus G. That's your growth rate. And dividend 2 is a further growth from a dividend 1, all right, or dividend 2 equals to dividend 0 times 1 plus G raised to the power of 2. And dividend 3 is a dividend 0 growth by 3 periods, so the exponent is 3 here. The mathematical formula is also pretty simple. Use a price 0, okay, that's what you need to solve. The stock price today equals to the first dividend, okay, over required return minus the growth rate. Okay, be very careful. Sometimes you were given dividend 0. You have to convert dividend 0 to dividend 1 because in the formula, if you want to solve for price 0, you should use the first period dividend. Okay, and this is also applicable to all the other stock price in other periods. So this is a formula you have. So you have a price 0 equals to a dividend 1 over R minus G. Okay, so sometimes I may ask you to solve for the stock price in the second period. And then you can use the same formula, but you have to do a little bit of adjustment. You need to use the dividend 3 as the numerator, and denominator is the same. Okay, so the bottom line is the dividend in the formula should be 1 period after the price you are solving for. Likewise, if you're solving for price 101, okay, so what's the dividend period? It should be a dividend 102, okay, over R minus G. The bottom line is always the dividend is always 1 period after the price. Okay. So why does the dividend grow? Well, if the firm saves money, then there is a growth opportunity. Just like you, if you keep saving money for yourself, and then you can accumulate more capital and then reinvest the capital and get more return. If you make money from your job, instead of saving them and you just spend them all to buy stuff, you do not have the money to invest, so you cannot get a return. Okay, so if you save money, just if the firm save money, the return will grow. So the money will be put in retained earnings. So each time the firm make profit, the firm can choose either to distribute the profit as a form of dividend or just to save it as retained earnings. If the firm save more money in retained earnings, then the firm will have more growth opportunities, and then the equity will grow in the future in a larger rate, and then the dividend also as a part of the return would grow in a larger rate. Okay, so here's something you need to know. First of all, the retention ratio, that's a financial ratio I did not quite cover in chapter 4. Retention ratio basically measures the percentage of net income is saved to the company's return earning account. Okay, and retention ratio is 1 minus dividend payout ratio. And dividend payout ratio is the percentage of net income being paid out as dividend. Okay, so the growth rate of dividend actually comes from the saving ratio, called retention ratio, times return on equity. Okay, times return on equity. So two factors determine the growth of dividend. The first factor is retention ratio. The more the company saves, then the higher growth rate for the dividend. The second is the return on equity. The more profit the company makes, then the higher growth rate of the dividend. All right. So next slide. So here is when the growth rate is 0% for dividend. So under what case do you have a 0% for dividend? Right here, let's say the company makes $100 and they just pay all $100. The company has $100 equity and they have a 100% dividend payout ratio. That is 0% retention ratio. These two would add up to 100%. So for each year, the company has the same earning profitability. So that's 10%. So with a total equity of 100 times 10%, then the company would have a net income of $10. Okay, so total equity times return on equity, that's a $10 net income. That's the profit. And then the company just to pay all a dividend, pay all the net income as dividend. So that's zero money being distributed or contributed to the total equity in the next year. So your total equity always stay 100 because you have no contribution to the equity. So with a 10% profitability, then you always get the same net income, and you decide to spend all the net income as dividend with no savings. So there's 0% for the dividend. So it always stay at $10. But here, if you decide to save 80% of your profit, your net income, and only pay out 20% of the net income as dividend, your story gonna change. So assume the profitability of the firm is still the same. The ROE is still 100%, and you also start with $100 equity. So the first year you make $10, and your dividend is $2. Okay, but you have $8 to put in the years of to put in the equity for the next year. So in the next year, the equity grow to 108. Okay, $8 coming from 10 minus 2, and then you'll still make a 10% ROE, and then your profit is 108 times 10%. Your net income is 10.8, and then 8% of the $10.80 will be saved, and 20% of that would be paid as dividend. Okay, so and then in the next year you have a more equity because the rest of the net income here will go to the total equity. All right, and then you have a net income, and you just use only part of the net income to pay as dividend, and then you get more equity distributed to the total equity in the next year, on and on. As you can see, your total equity keeps growing with the same return. You will get more and more net income, and with the same dividend payout ratio, you would get more and more dividends. So the dividend growth rate is 8%. It's the 80% retention rate times the 10% ROE. Okay, and here is one example. Okay, for constant growth model, and the company just paid a dividend of 50 cents and expected to increase its dividend by 2% per year. The market requires return is 15%. Okay, so that's 15%. You should use it as a discount rate. How much the stock should be selling for? This is the one question in your Excel project 3. All right, make sure you just go over that. If you use a mathematical formula to solve that, it's going to be quite easy, quite simple. Okay, you use the formula, which is price 0 equals to a dividend 1 over R minus G. R is a 15% required return. G is a 2%, 6% growth rate. Okay, and then that is your numbers. Okay, those are your numbers, and this is how you solve it. Okay, so what is the stock's value 1 year from now? As I wrote earlier on the board, okay, this is something you should be able to derive. Okay, so the dividend is always one period after the price. Okay, so if you are trying to solve for dividend price 1, you should use the dividend 2. Okay, so in this case, if you try to solve for price 1, okay, the stock value 1 year from now, and that price does not quite incorporate dividend 1, because the moment you buy the stock with the price 1, at price 1, the dividend 1 is already paid out. You do not receive dividend 1. So dividend 1 is not part of your cash flow generated by the stock if you buy the stock at the price 1. Okay, so your cash flow actually starting from a dividend 2, and then you use the same formula and do the math work, and then that's how you get the price. Okay, or you can put this way: the price is growing by the same rate of a dividend growth rate. Okay, so what you see here is, let me demonstrate that. So price 1 equals to dividend 2 over R minus G. You should know that right now. Okay, so what's the difference between dividend 1 and dividend 2? Dividend 2 is also dividend 1 times, okay, this is dividend 1 times 1 plus G. Okay, dividend 1 times 1 plus G. Can you see that? Dividend 1 times 1 plus G. Okay, so so dividend 1 over R minus G is basically price 0. So price 1 is price 0 times 1 plus G. Okay, so that's how you get the valuation done for the next period. Okay, just in case you didn't see the picture, let me zoom out myself a little bit. Okay, so price 1 equals to price 0 times 1 plus G. All right, and here are some more terminologies. You can see that dividend yield basically is the first dividend you receive over the price you pay today. Okay, and then you have capital gains yield. This is a very important concept. It's just like the percentage change of the stock price. So use the new price minus the old price divided by the old price. We have been exposed to this in our top chapter, chapter number 7, how to get the price change in percentage. Okay, that price change in percentage is also called capital gains. All right, and the next one is total return. The total return is just the required return or the rate used to discount the cash flows. Okay, the total return is a dividend yield, which is this one, plus the capital gains yield. So if you hold the stock, you have a return from 2 sources. First source is from dividends. The second source is from the appreciation of the stock price. Okay, so they both contribute to your total return. And this total return is also the required return.